Well, I think we might go ahead and get started. Um, there's just I just have a few library things that I want to mention. You can certainly ask questions in the chat, but we might, I think afterward, have a bit of a discussion. So please feel free to unmute yourselves and join in that way too. It's great to kind of have a group discussion about topics like this. I do want to mention a couple of events coming up. Since you all are interested in this, we are having, weather permitting, an in-person forest bathing talk on May 4th. And you can register for that at our website. And let me throw up the link for that. And then also, Shannon put together a really amazing book list that includes Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, and the Commons will be hosting her via Zoom on April 1st, and it is free and open to the public. So for more, or open to everybody via Zoom. So for more information on that, there is the link to that and how you can get in on that program. And then I also want to mention we are having our foundation fundraiser this Thursday via Zoom. So if that interests you, we've got Deja Brooks and former Governor Kathleen Sebelius. They will be hosting that. So we're going to try to raise money for digital content this Thursday. So if that interests you, the link lplks.org will give you all the information on how to sign up for that. So those are just some events that you might be interested in. And also after today, by Thursday, I'll get that list of books out to you via email, and then also a link to the recording and along with these event links too. So look for that in your inbox. Sometimes my library emails end up in people's spam folders. So if you don't see it in like your immediate email, I think the lplks.org, it siphons stuff off into spam. So if you don't see it, you know, by Thursday evening in your inbox, check your spam folder. And then if you have any questions, you can also email me. I'll throw in my email address in the chat. So you can email me there if you have any questions, or, you know, if I didn't get you your info or anything, just email me. And now I want to introduce our wonderful speaker today, Shannon Gores. She is a certified forest therapy guide, and she leads forest bathing walks, which are designed with a particular structure of practices that deepen an individual's relationship with themselves and nature. She has worked as a social worker, and she is an ordained minister, serving as a pediatric chaplain in Kansas City, helping families with children. Through contemplative coaching, known as spiritual direction or spiritual companionship, Shannon has also supported 20 to 70-year-olds in moving toward the life they long for. And she is here to help us get ready for forest bathing. So I'll hand it off to you, Shannon.
Thanks, Kristen, and thank you everyone for joining. I'm so happy to share this practice with you. For the first 20 minutes or so, I'll share some of the health science behind, like, why is this so powerful? Somebody asked that in the chat, like, why does this work? I love nature, I know it's great. So we'll talk about that, and feel free to share questions in the chat. And then I'll lead you in a 15-minute practice to actually experience what is it like to have a forest therapy, a forest bathing session, even in your own living room, if you have a plant or fruit by you. And how is it different from hiking or a naturalist walk, where we're getting exercise or we're trying to learn all the properties about something. And then we'll have more time for Q&A and discussion. So with that, I'm gonna share my screen. So how forest bathing helps everyone. All human beings can benefit from time in nature from a variety of ways. And as Kristen mentioned, I got my certification through the Association of Nature and Forest Therapy Guides and Programs. After being a chaplain and a social worker for a long time, helping people find meaning and wholeness in their life, whether it was due to past trauma or current anger, grief, pain. And I still do that individual therapeutic work, but I start to see that nature is this healing component that without it, our sense of wholeness isn't quite complete. So let's start with, what is forest therapy? And I just want to check, can you all see the slides all right? Kristen?
Yeah, yes, it looks good from my end.
Great, thank you. So forest therapy in the United States started developing after a type of forest bathing in Japan called Shinrin-Yoku. And that has been developed for many decades, but particularly in the 1980s, it became popular because they were going through urbanization. And the government recognized that there was a huge increase in autoimmune disorders, cardiovascular disease, stress, and other problems. So they wanted to get people back out in nature and have government-sponsored programs and research to see what was most effective. Here in the United States in 2012, Amos Clifford started looking at what would help people here with our stress levels and our health issues, and modified some of those practices through research and testing, which I'll talk more about. But it's primarily a practice that is slow and mindful. And we call it forest bathing because the trees are a critical component to some of the key health aspects, but you can really get benefits whether you're prairie bathing or ocean bathing, just immersed in a really natural environment. And it emphasizes sensory connection and intelligence of the body. So as we'll do in our practice today, we get into the 5 senses, even include other senses like the intuitive sense, the heart sense, up to 14 different kinds of senses, the way we can relate on different levels to the environment around us, besides just cognitive thinking. So we're not trying to learn and memorize things, but rather have a relationship with them. And when we have a relationship with other beings in the natural world, it gives us a larger sense of well-being and connection. So we go on an easy, gentle trail. We're not trying to get the heart rate up like hiking, but going at a slow pace and staying in a small area, usually less than a mile. And it takes a longer amount of time for us to shift into the parasympathetic nervous system and have some of those relaxation responses. So we designate like 2 to 4 hours without cell phones, with intentional practices. It begins with an opening circle. That is a chance to get familiar with who else is in the group, both humans, and then looking around at the environment and understanding how to be safe on the walk. And then we have the guided meditation that helps us come into our senses. This meditation is called the pleasure of presence. And unlike other forms of mindfulness where we might be trying to clear thoughts away or stay focused on something that's neutral, this form of meditation is actually bringing in the enjoyable and making connection that way. Then we have a variety of invitations that help us stay focused on a specific way of relating. They might be something like wander around the area for the next 10 minutes, exploring the sense of touch. You might use your fingers or your cheek or any other part of your body that feels called to texture in this area. Or another invitation might be to gather all the tiny things that catch your eye's attention, bring them back, and we'll put together an offering back to the forest. So they're like simple activities that have no specific endpoint or grading or anything like that. And we call them invitations because you get to adapt them to whatever works for your body and your heart. It really is an invitation to consider interacting in the forest, not a prescription for something you have to get done. And the invitations are a way to explore nature, maybe like you did as a child, or maybe like you've never done, and find new ways to connect. Most forest bathing walks ends with a sit spot, which is a time to really nestle in a certain place wherever you are. You can wander and find a place that calls to you, maybe a being that calls to you, sitting on the base of a tree next to a flower, by an ant colony, and spend 20 minutes observing, noticing what's alive for you in that spot, maybe having a conversation with whatever beings are nearby. And then we transition into a tea time at the end. And the tea is usually a medicinal plant that I've harvested locally, maybe fresh while we're walking on the trail, or if it's winter, maybe something I've dried from the fall season or summer season. And in this opportunity, we ingest into our body what we've just been communing with. We are taking in the cycle of life, aware of how the forest is healing us. Between all of these activities, we have listening circles where we come together and can really hear what's happening for each other. What are you noticing? What's your experience like? And you can always share or pass as you wish. Then we close up with a final closing circle, a poem, a gratitude, a goodbye, and people wander back to their starting point. So the proven physiological effects of forest therapy, this is some of the exciting parts for those of you who are already familiar with the feel-good aspect of loving being outside. You know, what does it do for us beyond an emotional level? Being in nature, slow, intentionally, for a long amount of time, helps lower the concentrations of cortisol in the body, which is the stress, and also increases the natural killer cells, which is our immune response system. So how does it do that? Somebody asked. Trees have this amazing organic compound called phytocytes that they shower themselves in when they feel an attack, like fungi or bacteria are coming that might hurt their system, and it protects them. When we as human beings are out in the woods and the trees, we also will get some of that showering on us. And research has shown that it revs up our immune system too. So we get this benefit from breathing it in, from it falling on our skins. And if you're in need of an immune system boost, conifers are the heaviest phytocyte shedders. So you might sit under a conifer 20 to 30 minutes a day and get that support. So it also regulates our blood pressure. And at first they were just studying how it helps blood pressure go down for people who are stressed. And then they realized that for people who had too low blood pressure, it actually helped raise it. So the next research they want to do is figuring out how does this regulate blood pressure in the way that the human body needs it. It increases parasympathetic nerve activity and can alleviate symptoms of anxiety and depression on quality of life rating scales. Participants who've been in different studies practicing slow, intentional, mindful time in nature continue to score better and better on anxiety and depression scales, as well as reports of chronic widespread pain. So being in nature in this way really relaxes people's body in a way that it can start to heal itself. And the key variable in this is the natural environment. So to make sure it was, nature that's doing this, some studies in Japan took groups of people out into the forest environment and gave them a weekend retreat, and took another group of people into an urban environment and did the same exercises, mindfulness and meditation and relaxation. In this study, they also did yoga and some other things. And while both groups felt a little better, every time the group who's in nature has even improved health outcomes. A lot of the health research is available online. Dose of Nature has a ton of great information, as well as theories that haven't been proven yet, but are a little bit more inquiry behind the why. So they know that wind, water, and birdsong are the three most healing sounds. But the question is why, some hypotheses is that when we hear trickling water, like a bubbling brook, for example, or a fountain in a building, it reminds us that there's a fresh source of water, which is absolutely needed for life, and calms us in a very biological survival way. For birdsong, some of the hypothesis is that it's associated with waking up in the morning and being alert and lifting the mood with the rising sun. And wind rustling through the trees is also very soothing. So they continue to do studies on sounds of nature, for example, by looking at what happened in Germany when they built the airport, and 1 million people around that area were suddenly introduced to high decibel, over 50 sounds, and saw hypertension go up by 20%. And so looking at what is it about natural sounds that are so healing as opposed to unnatural sounds. And from somebody else's question, I'll say that there's also a couple theories about called attention restoration theory, which supposes that our time in nature helps us get an emotional distance away from what is stressing us, and that distance gives us a mental perspective that can shift some of our thinking. So scope and depth really help us calm down, as well as compatibility, just that humans have evolved in a natural environment for 99.99% of human history. And so we're attuned to finding and meeting all of our needs in the natural environment, our food, our shelter, and that sense of safety is really grounding and healing. And it's just easier on our brain. Lastly, I'll note that fractals have been researched, which is the way that lines divide, found in like leaf patterns, wave patterns, etc. And there's this 1.3 to 1.5 ratio that literally tells like our visual cortex to relax. And they've done research looking at these patterns compared to other patterns. So more research is needed, but there's a ton of it going on, and you can find more online. And if you're particularly interested in that area, let me know and I can send you more articles. Just want to share for a couple minutes about the Association of Nature and Forest Therapy's vision, which is to get people out in nature and also to integrate this healing work into the healthcare systems worldwide, and also into land management and conservation and education. They've trained over 2,000 guides globally so far to lead these walks, to give people a practice in how to be in nature in a healthful and holistic way. So they would like to become one of the largest networks of people tapping into this healing power, and have even started offering to hospitals and doctors, let's prescribe forest bathing, to our patients who have need for increased immunity, who have cardiovascular health concerns. In Canada, has a wide range of healthcare systems that are prescribing nature therapy, forest therapy, teaching people how to do this as a complementary part of their healthcare. They're also looking at the economics of it, because as we know in the United States, if you can prove that something will shift the economics of what's needed for healthcare, you're more likely to be successful in being heard. And to integrate these practices into conservation and education, they're really looking at what motivates people to save the natural environment, to get involved in advocacy, to do political work, or to be on a local nonprofit or board, to volunteer time, restoring the natural environment, or engaging regenerative agriculture. We protect what we love, and to come into a loving relationship with nature is just as important as understanding the facts about why we need to take care of the natural environment in the world. So forest therapy really focuses on that loving relationship where we have a sense of interbeing with the natural world around us. We understand that we are part of the web and that it offers gifts to us, and in reciprocity, we're offering gifts back to it, co-living. A few last things I'll mention before our practice today is a common question. Why do I need a guide? I hang out outside all the time. And for some people, it's very effective to go alone and keep in mind the intention to be slow, spend time. You can even set a timer on your phone to say, okay, I'm going to dedicate a half hour today, or I'm going to do this wander activity for 10 minutes. But for many people, it is hard. Our lives are stressful and fast-paced. We maybe are used to hiking where we're getting exercise. For many people, their mind wanders a lot, or they get bored, or they feel unsafe being in the woods due to dangerous opportunities out there. So going with a guide provides regulation in terms of keeping the intention and pace on point, as well as that support that you're completely safe and can let the parasympathetic nervous system take over, and that you don't have to stay in an arousal state where you're constantly shifting and noticing. So the forest is the therapist, and the guide opens the door, helps you connect with that. Here's that book list that Kristen and I mentioned. We will send out a bunch of great books related to this concept of forest therapy and why and how it is so effective. For the person who asked, like, I want to know more about how this works, the biophilia effect would be a really great one to read about that interconnection. And Dr. King Lee has a lot of research in his book, How Trees Can Help You Find Health and Happiness. If you are a person who wants to go on your own without a guide, this book is not on the list, but I would add it. It's a pocket guide book called Your Guide to Forest Bathing, and it's by Amos Clifford, the founder of the Association of Nature and Forest Therapy in the US. So we'll get that out to you. And if you do want an in-person opportunity, we're doing a free in-person mini session through the library on May 4th, and Kristen's sending out that link if you want to sign up, get a little taste of what that's like outside. I'm also doing a series of 90-minute walks through Lawrence Park and Rec Department starting in April. They'll be at 1:30 p.m. and you can register on their website. I also do monthly walks on Saturdays and Sundays, and I have one coming up this Saturday and Sunday because it's going to be 60 degrees out. It'll be beautiful. And you can find more of my information on my website, and you're welcome to email me or find me on Facebook. And I frequently post articles that pop up about latest research for nature therapy, as well as individual support. So those are some ways you can get connected with me. Let's see if I can exit my screen share so I can see all your lovely faces again. For anybody who's willing to put their video on, it's great to see your smile. Thank you. And let's see. I'll take a few questions now if folks have questions just from that information. And then we'll do our experiential activity. And then I'll have a little more time for questions at the end. So if anybody has a question from anything I shared, I'll take a couple right now.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Hello. I guess this is around resistance or barriers, if that's all right.
Yes.
I have 3 children, 7, 5, and 2. And of course, I guess that in and of itself is kind of a challenge wrangling. And then gear. And I think I put it in the chat, just critters, or really specifically in Kansas where we are, mosquitoes. You know, like how does a person prepare for that as a, I guess, and I'm asking probably, a folded in question, as a mom, and then just with gear wise, and how to prepare one's body further for what you might encounter.
Thank you so much for that question. I'm feeling it in my heart because my 4-year-old this morning would not go outside with me, and it was a beautiful day, and it made me stressful. I feel stressed just trying to want to go outside.
Right.
So for parents out there, there's so many options, and I can't prescribe a particular thing for your family, but I can say some of the things that I do is think of enticements like, oh, I wonder if we can go make a little fairy hut outside today, or a gnome home, because I know that sticks fell off the trees last night in the wind, and I'm going to build a really cool one. Sometimes I use chocolate as a bribe, I'll be honest. Sometimes it's just getting excited myself instead of trying to say, hey, like, come on, I really want to go out, get dressed. I go, I'm getting on my shoes. I'm so excited. I'm getting on my coat. And I just get to the door and like be a leader in that. And as far as the mosquitoes and other things, if you have the ability to get to a place that's breezy, some days in Kansas are super windy, which children don't like sometimes either. But if you can get to a breezy place that can keep mosquitoes away, the other thing I've done is plug in a fan in an extension cord to my garage or to the house and run the fan in the yard and play in the yard in front of the fan on a breezy less day. Lots of tips and tricks to try to get outside with kiddos. And I'd be happy to chat with you more if you want to reach out to me after the program, because I hear your mother. I hear you. And I had another question here about changing screensavers to nature scenes. They have done research, and yes, pictures of fractals in particular, water, other nature elements, do help us de-stress to similar levels that actually going outside does. So if you can get pictures in your home, in your office, on your computer, just the more nature you see, the better for your brain it is. Yeah, feel free to post your question in the chat. I see some people doing it, or unmute yourself. Anybody else? Okay, let's go into our guided meditation. This is the beginning of the forced therapy walk after we've oriented ourselves to this place that we are and safety measures around us, how to be safe. And so if you can grab your plant being or fruit or anything you might have nearby you, it'll be nice to keep that handy. So the pleasure of presence. We begin by just noticing the presence of life next to us. And when we've noticed through our eyes, we'll let the eyelids soften down, either all the way or part way. And come into the inner eye. Bringing the mind's awareness down to the breath. Observing the inhalation and the exhalation, just as it is. No need to change it, unless you want to. Perhaps tracing the air from the outside in through the body and back out again. And bringing our mind's attention to our sense of hearing. Noticing soft noises nearby. And loud noises. If you're hearing any human-made noises, I wonder if you might turn the volume down on those and shift the awareness to any natural noises and turn that volume up. If you're indoors right now, I wonder if there might be any sounds from outside the window, like wind or birds. Or sounds from your own nature-made body, the heartbeat, breath in the back of the throat. And leaning in close to your plant being, listening for any sounds it may be making. And shifting to our sense of smell. Drawing air in through both nostrils. Maybe long, deep sniffs in. Perhaps getting close to your fruit or the soil of your plant. Maybe lifting the nose in the air like a bear, taking short sniffs in on one side and the other side. Catch any scents on the breeze. And linking our sense of smell to the sense of taste. We can run our tongue along the gums and teeth of the mouth, perhaps catching any flavors from food earlier in the day. And playfully letting the tongue hang out like a dog. See if we can catch a flavor from the air. Or curling the tongue like a straw, sucking up the taste of this place. And if you feel extra curious today, you might even take the tip of the tongue right to a part of your being. What does this being taste like? Or even just a teeny bit of soil on the tip of the tongue. What's this being's food like? And then bringing our mind's eye into the skin of the body and our sense of touch. We can slowly bring our palms together, letting skin touch skin. And perhaps comparing the feel of texture of skin to clothing or jewelry or hair. And bringing the palms out in front of the body, palms up toward the sky. I wonder what it's like to hold air. And relaxing the arms down, we'll drop our sense of awareness down through the breath, past the torso, and walking our mind's eye down the legs into the soles of the feet. Perhaps wiggling the toes or rolling from heel to ball of the feet. Pressing each sole of the foot into the ground. And awakening the imagination. We can allow tiny roots to grow out of the soles of the feet, pressing their way through sock or shoe, floor, finding tiny crevices to grow down into the earth. down into the soil, rocks or sand. We might even let little eyeballs pop into the ends of those roots and take a look around. Maybe there's worms or tree roots or other critters there. What is it like to be neighbors with this world below? And drawing our roots back up into the feet. And walking the mind's eye back up the inside of the legs, up those bones and muscles, back up into the heart center. We'll now move slowly in 360 degrees. So whether you're sitting or standing, however it's comfortable for you, just slowly turn the body, still with the eyelids closed down. Let the body move in a circle. And keep going, turning slowly at the body's direction. Until you feel your body say, stop. This is the way I want to be facing. Turning until you find that place of pause. What might the body be longing for in this direction? Something near or far or very far. And placing hands on the heart. Holding our relationship to this outside world. I wonder what it's like to have your heart. Now in a moment, not right now, but in a moment, we'll fully open our eyes. And when we do, I invite you to consider that the being you're looking at is also looking at you. So when you're ready, fully open your eyes. And we'll come back to our circle. So whenever you're ready to turn your video on, love to see some of your faces and to practice the next step in force bathing, which is if you feel called to share, what are you noticing? It could be something you literally noticed in your senses outside, or something you're noticing that's happening for you inside.
My sense of ability to accomplish goals today I feel a lot better than I did about an hour ago.
Thank you, Molly. So one aspect of forced bathing, sharing and listening time is to only respond with thank you, as we practice honoring somebody's share without a need to give an opinion or feedback or affirmation or critique. To be a witness to somebody else, like the forest is a witness to us. So Molly, I simply say thank you. And if you're an introvert or just don't want to talk, you're also welcome to post your noticing in the chat, or perhaps write it down in a journal. Does anybody else want to verbalize or write something that I could read out loud? Calm, connection, grateful, partnership. Thank you. So in a forest bathing session, our next invitation would be something like spend the next 10 minutes walking slowly. Slowly, as if each foot is kissing the ground. Noticing any movement that you see. You can look side to side, but also up and down. So we'd spend about 10 minutes doing that and come back to circle. Or we might have an invitation such as follow your sense of smell. Where might your nose want to take you today? So often we follow our eyes. It's our predominant sense, and our feet go along. We can be in a maze or labyrinth of sorts, following the nose, the sense of smell in the nose, or what we hear. Follow the most pleasing sound and get as close as you can, and find the next one. Many different ways to play and sink in. Spend the next 15 minutes dabbling in the stream. Maybe throwing rocks in, maybe toes. But there's no shoulds or have tos, because the body really knows what it needs. And in relationship to the natural environment, it sorts things out together. Our senses trigger memories, thoughts, and experiences that need to be processed and unraveled. And all we need to do is give them space to play in a supportive way, and they will unwind. Sometimes in our listening circles, people are laughing, sometimes they're crying. There's a wide variety of ways that is therapeutic for somebody, because each person brings their own life experience and needs to the activity. So whatever you feel or didn't feel in today's activity is totally great and totally right for you, and maybe similar or completely different another time. So with that, we have a few minutes left, and I'm curious if anybody has other thoughts they want to share in general about nature therapy, their own experiences, doesn't have to be from today's session, or other questions that have come up from the presentation earlier. Thanks for the question in the chat, David. Can we force bathe in winter when everything is bare or hibernating? Awesome question, and absolutely. It can be challenging, but well worth the effort. I have a video on how to dress really, really super warm for the winter in my Heart Deep Force Bathing Facebook group, but I can also email it to anybody if you email me. But staying warm ourselves is a key part of having a therapeutic experience, because we move much slower than we're used to, like walking or hiking, keeping our body warm. And when everything appears bare to our naked eye as we walk by, well, we slow down and get really intimate. We may notice things that we don't typically notice when we're walking by on a trail. And also, we can use these other senses to connect with things that are hibernating. We may find like I just did a walk a week ago, and found like a pile of feathers from a creature, probably a bird that had probably become somebody's meal, and just meditated on that cycle of life. Here's the remains of a being, that was consumed. And what is winter like for that creature that was eaten, and what was winter like for the one who found food, and just being with that process. There's also a lot of ways to be in the silence of winter. There's a different sort of energy in the woods if you're out of town, as well as ways to play in snow or hard mud. And there are some specific invitations also in this book that I mentioned earlier about different seasons. And there is an app called Treequility, with a Q, kind of like tranquility, but Treequility, that has regional invitations. So those would have some good ones for winter as well. So thanks for that question. I'd be curious if anybody here does outdoor mindfulness in the winter, and if they have any tips or tricks or shares.
Well, I went out a few days ago with my two young children, 3 and 6, and we ended up finding some pine cones under a tree. And so, investigating closely at the pine cones, we saw that like on the tips, there was this resin. So then we pinched it and smelled the pine sap. And it was, it's just so, it's not, you think in winter that everything's dead and sleep, but there's so much that happens in winter that everything's in a cycle. And when you start getting outside, you start to see, oh, it's the time for this. And I just love that about getting out in nature regularly, even in the winter.
Thank you, Ali. The pine reminds me, when I started my training, I was like, how am I going to serve tea in the winter? Like, I won't have anything to pick and steep in hot water for my participants. And my guide was like, start researching and looking, like indigenous peoples here in Lawrence, Kansas, the Kaw Nation, lived here, and there's lots of different food available in the forest. So I learned like the white pine needles. You can actually pick those 5 needles off in a clump and put them in hot water, and they make a medicinal tea with vitamin C, like to the level of oranges. Just amazing. So much to learn and explore. Yeah. Any last question before I close and hand it back to Kristen? Well, thank you so much for joining me today. It's always an honor to share this practice with others because nature is so healing, and it just takes a moment of our time to dip in and dedicate ourselves to it. I am providing group walks, both private for people who want private walks and public walks, that we keep social distance right now. So you can check that out on the website. And I'm happy to send more resources if you have particular ailments or things. And I also do individual therapeutic support if anybody's interested in that. So thanks. And Kristen, do you have anything else to close?
I think that's a lovely closing. I'll just a reminder to check your email. I'll send out a list of all of those resources. So keep an eye out. And thank you so much, Shannon, for doing this. I think it's just a wonderful thing to do all the time, but especially after what everyone's been through in the last year. It's particularly healing a year into COVID. So thank you all so much for coming, and thank you so much, Shannon. Very, very much appreciated.